I'm your dream companion, the one who helps you unwind after a long, busy day. Before you drift off to sleep, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it there? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable in bed, and come with me because the night is just beginning, and this story is all yours. The forest was thick and endless, its canopy swallowing the light of the late afternoon. 5 friends had been walking for hours, their voices cracking with exhaustion and fear. The trail they thought would lead them back to the campsite had disappeared behind them, replaced by a maze of identical trees and whispering wind. The sound of footsteps crunching over leaves echoed strangely, as if someone else were walking just behind them. But every time they turned around, there was nothing. Dusk fell quickly, and the air grew colder. Their flashlights flickered in the encroaching dark, and the silence was broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Then, from between the trees, they saw a faint orange glow, a campfire. Relieved, they ran toward it, calling out until the shape of a man emerged from the shadows. He was tall, wearing an old, torn coat, and carried an axe slung over his shoulder. His face was half hidden by a beard and the brim of his hat, but his voice was calm when he spoke. "You're lost," he said simply. They nodded, trembling with fatigue and relief. "There's a small town not far from here," he continued. "Follow me. I know the way." None of them hesitated. His presence felt oddly reassuring, though something about him, his stillness, maybe, or the way the firelight didn't quite touch his eyes, sent a chill crawling down their spines. As they walked, the forest seemed to part for him, paths forming naturally beneath his boots. The group followed in silence, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the cold night. No one noticed that the woods behind them had gone completely silent, as if even the wind dared not disturb the man who led them. The group followed the old man through the winding woods, their flashlights flickering weakly against the curtain of darkness. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, and their breath fogged in the cold. Every so often, one of them would glance at the stranger's back. His coat looked old, like something from another time, worn at the seams and darkened with years of use. Yet he moved with a steady, effortless pace, never hesitating, never looking around to find the way. It was as if he had walked that path 1,000 times. The forest thinned, and a faint mist began to gather along the ground, swirling around their ankles like smoke. The friends whispered among themselves, relieved, perhaps, that someone had found them, but unsettled by the man's silence. When one of them tried to start a conversation, asking his name, he replied simply, "Iageloso." The name felt strange on their tongues, foreign, almost heavy. They walked for what felt like hours, though none of them could tell how much time had passed. The moon rose high above the trees, pale and enormous, and for a moment, they thought they could see rooftops glimmering in the distance. "The town," one of them whispered. He was right. Hope surged through their chests, warming them from the inside out. But then, as they drew closer, something strange began to happen. The temperature dropped sharply, and the mist thickened until it obscured their vision. The man ahead of them grew fainter in the haze, his outline blurring. "Sir," one of them called out, "wait for us." No answer. They hurried forward, stumbling through the fog, hearts pounding, and then, as suddenly as it had come, the mist cleared. They were standing on a dirt road that led to the small, sleeping town below. The sound of the forest had vanished completely, and so had the man named Iad. For a long moment, no one spoke. The forest behind them stood silent, like a wall of black glass, and the town below glowed faintly under the ghostly light of the moon. "Where did he go?" someone whispered. They turned in circles, calling out his name, but only their own voices answered back, dull and distant. One of them pointed toward the dirt path. There were footprints in the soft soil, large and deep, leading all the way from the woods. But halfway down the slope, the prints simply stopped, as if the man had vanished into thin air. Panic crept into their chests. Maybe he took another path, one of them offered weakly, but his voice trembled. None of them believed it. They began walking again, faster this time, until the first faint lights of the town came into view. When they finally reached the main street, the quiet was almost comforting. A few shops still had lanterns glowing in the windows. They spotted a small convenience store and went inside, desperate for warmth, for noise, for the simple company of someone alive. The woman behind the counter looked startled when she saw them, muddy, pale, exhausted. "We got lost in the woods," one of them explained breathlessly. "A man helped us find the way." "A lumberjack named Iageloso." The woman froze. For a second, her expression was unreadable, then slowly drained of color. She repeated softly, "That's not possible." Her husband came from the back room, frowning. When he heard the name, his face went as pale as hers. The man's voice was low when he finally spoke. "You must be mistaken. Iageloso died in those woods years ago. There was an accident, a tree fell on him while he was working. No one's seen him since." A heavy silence filled the room. The group exchanged uneasy glances, thinking of the man's quiet voice, his steady steps, the way the woods had seemed to move aside for him. One of them, hands shaking, pulled out a phone. "We took a picture with him," she said. "You'll see." She opened the photo and the color drained from her face. The group leaned in close, hearts pounding, and stared. They were all there, standing on the forest path, smiling nervously at the camera. But between them, where the lumberjack should have been, there was only empty air and a faint human-shaped shadow. The room was deathly silent. The hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock the only sounds. The group stared at the phone in disbelief. How could someone so tangible, so real, be missing from the photograph entirely? They remembered every detail: the rough hands, the smell of pine, the steady pace as he led them down the path. And now, looking at the image, it was as if none of it had ever existed. The shadow where he should have been seemed to shimmer faintly, like it belonged neither to the forest nor to the world they knew. A chill crept down their spines. One of them whispered, "It's like he never existed, like he was never real." But the lingering smell of sawdust and the memory of his voice denied that. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the small shop. The group felt the weight of the woods pressing in on them, even from this distance. Every laugh, every crack of the night from the forest earlier, came back vividly. They could feel his presence, though invisible, lingering just beyond the edge of the town. One of the friends, trying to break the tension, asked, "But how?" "He guided us. He spoke to us. He saved us from getting lost." The shopkeeper's gaze was heavy, filled with sorrow and warning. The forest, it doesn't forget. Iageloso never left. Some spirits remain to guide, some to watch. He protects travelers, but he isn't one of the living anymore. Sometimes, the ones who see him don't realize it until it's too late to understand what they've experienced. The friends left the shop, minds spinning, trying to reconcile what they had seen. They walked through the quiet streets, the town's warm lights casting long shadows, each one stretching like a hand reaching for them. Every time they glanced back toward the woods, a sense of being watched prickled their skin. That faint human-shaped shadow seemed to follow them, lingering in the corner of their eyes, impossible to shake. Phones out, they tried to take more pictures of the path leading back to the forest. But each image revealed nothing but trees and empty ground. He was there, and he wasn't a presence that defied explanation. By the time they reached the edge of town, they understood a terrifying truth. Iageloso wasn't just a memory or a ghost story. He was a guardian of the woods, a spirit who bridged life and death. Yet his existence was fragile, visible only to those who needed him. They realized that their adventure had ended. But the shadow of the forest stand of Iageloso would follow them forever, haunting the edges of every memory, every photograph, a silent reminder that some things in this world can never be fully explained, and some spirits, no matter how kind, are not meant to be seen by the living. A man and a woman had been searching for the perfect home for months. They had visited countless houses, but nothing seemed right. Either the price was too high, the location inconvenient, or the structure required too many repairs. One day, however, they came across a modest house that was priced lower than expected. It had some structural issues, cracks in the walls, and a few tiles missing from the roof. But the couple saw potential. They decided it was worth the investment and purchased the home. Planning to renovate it little by little over time, they moved in with hope and excitement, ready to create their ideal living space. The first few weeks were quiet, and everything seemed normal, except for one strange occurrence that began almost immediately. Every night, at exactly midnight, the doorbell rang. The couple would hurry to the entrance, only to find no one there. They checked the front yard, the street, and even the surrounding houses, but no visitor ever appeared. The phenomenon continued night after night, and the couple slowly began to grow uneasy. They tried to rationalize it, thinking perhaps it was a prank by teenagers in the neighborhood or an old electrical fault in the system, but deep down, they knew something was off. One night, the man decided to investigate more closely. He approached the door quietly, watching through the peephole. To his shock, he saw the doorbell button moving up and down on its own, as if an invisible hand were pressing it. No one was there. His heart raced, but curiosity forced him to stay and observe. Every night thereafter, he would watch the button, and each time, it pressed itself exactly at midnight. The couple started speaking in hushed tones about the strange occurrences, wondering what could be causing it. Days went by, and the oddities did not stop. One afternoon, a friend of the woman came to visit. She spent time chatting in the living room before stepping into the garden alone. Moments later, she came running back inside, pale and wide-eyed. She claimed she had seen a small creature, tiny goblin or elf, standing by the flowers, smiling and waving at her before disappearing into thin air. The woman laughed nervously, trying to convince her friend that it was her imagination, that perhaps the shadows and sunlight had played a trick. Yet the visitor was adamant. She had seen it clearly, and the sight had terrified her. The woman brushed it off, but the incident planted a seed of doubt. Later, another friend visited and reported the same experience. The small, mischievous figure had appeared again, observing from the garden before vanishing. By now, the woman could no longer deny that something unusual was happening. She turned to her husband, describing both encounters and urging him to take the events seriously. But he remained skeptical, insisting there had to be a logical explanation. He refused to believe in ghosts or magical creatures. The woman, however, felt a growing sense of unease, sensing that the house held secrets beyond their understanding. The nights continued, the clock struck 12, and the doorbell rang again. The invisible hand pressed it. The small creature observed them from afar, and the couple slowly realized that their new home might not be as ordinary as it seemed. As the weeks passed, the strange events in the house grew more unsettling. The midnight doorbell continued to ring without fail, and the couple could no longer ignore it. Every night the man would cautiously approach the door, his heart hammering in his chest, only to witness the button pressing itself as though guided by an unseen force. The repetition of the event made them both anxious, leaving a lingering sense of unease that no amount of rational thinking could dispel. The house that once promised comfort and security now felt like a living entity, watching them, testing them, waiting. One afternoon, the man was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when he noticed something unusual. Plates and cutlery that he had just placed on the counter began to disappear before his eyes. He blinked, thinking he might be imagining things, but the silverware was truly gone. Turning around, he saw a small figure, barely more than a foot tall, clutching the dishes and staring at him with a mischievous grin. It was the same goblin-like creature his wife's friends had seen. Its eyes twinkled with playful malice as it held the stolen utensils. The man froze, unsure whether to scream or simply watch in disbelief. The tiny being seemed almost to enjoy the shock it had caused, and after a few moments, it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the man alone in the quiet kitchen. Plates gone, and a sense of dread settling over him. The woman returned home that evening, finding her husband pale and shaken. He recounted the incident, and she finally admitted that the strange occurrences could no longer be dismissed as mere imagination. Together, they began to notice patterns. The creature appeared, mostly during moments when they were alone or distracted. It seemed to enjoy minor chaos, moving objects, creating small disturbances, and disappearing before they could confront it. The once warm and welcoming home was slowly transforming into a place where the couple constantly felt watched and tested. That night, curiosity overcame fear. The man stayed awake, determined to catch a glimpse of the mysterious visitor. He hid near the kitchen, eyes fixed on the counter, waiting. At exactly midnight, he saw movement. The tiny figure emerged from the shadows, gliding silently across the floor with the stolen utensils clutched in its hands. Its presence was surreal, barely tangible, yet undeniably there. The man wanted to call out, to demand answers, but fear rooted him to the spot. The creature paused, looked directly at him, and let out a high-pitched, almost musical giggle. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving only a faint echo and an unshakable feeling of being tested. The couple realized that their house was no ordinary home. It had a guardian of sorts, perhaps a trickster spirit that relished in their unease. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light, every midnight chime of the bell seemed to be a reminder that they were not alone. Sleep became restless, conversation cautious, and their once joyful renovations now felt overshadowed by the presence of the small, enigmatic creature. Each night brought anticipation and fear, a delicate balance between curiosity and dread. The goblin, or whatever it truly was, had claimed a space in their lives, and the couple could not ignore it any longer. Their home was alive with secrets, and the mysterious visitor was just the beginning. The couple grew increasingly desperate to understand the nature of their tiny visitor. Each night, the goblin, or whatever it truly was, appeared more audacious, not only stealing small items but also rearranging furniture, hiding keys, and occasionally leaving odd trinkets in unusual places. It was as if the creature had a personality, an intention beyond mere mischief. The couple began documenting every incident, noting the time, location, and what had been taken or moved. They spoke cautiously, whispering when the creature was near, afraid that even the sound of their voices might provoke it further. One evening, after returning from a day of errands, the woman found the living room transformed. Chairs were stacked in precarious towers, books scattered across the floor, and a faint trail of crumbs led from the kitchen to the fireplace. At the end of the trail, the little goblin sat perched atop a pile of books, holding a tiny candle in one hand and a spoon in the other. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and it seemed almost to beckon them closer. The woman froze, heart pounding, but the man stepped forward, speaking in a calm voice. "We mean no harm. We just want to understand you." The creature tilted its head, as if considering his words. Then, with a sudden leap, it vanished into the shadows, leaving only a soft giggle behind. The next few nights were eerily quiet, and the couple wondered if their attempt to communicate had changed the goblin's behavior, but the silence was deceptive. On the seventh night, the doorbell rang again, though it wasn't midnight tanned, they discovered all of their missing utensils neatly arranged on the doorstep, accompanied by a small note scribbled in what looked like red ink. It read, "Respect my home, and I respect yours." The message was clear. The creature was not merely playing pranks. It was asserting its presence and its rules. The couple realized they had been intruders in a space already claimed by a being that did not follow human logic or conventions, determined to coexist rather than battle the mysterious presence. They adjusted their routines. They left small offerings, simple meals, coins, tiny ornaments at the places the creature seemed to favor. Nights became tense but less chaotic. The goblin accepted the offerings, sometimes leaving small gifts in return: a polished pebble, a perfectly folded napkin, a feather carefully placed on a chair. Slowly, a form of uneasy understanding developed. Though the house remained unpredictable, the couple learned that their fear could be tempered with respect and careful observation. They were no longer simply victims of a trickster spirit. They had become participants in a delicate balance, negotiating peace with the supernatural. The lessons of the small, elusive visitor were profound. It was a reminder that the world contained forces beyond human comprehension, that homes could hold secrets and guardians hidden in plain sight. The goblin was not malevolent in the traditional sense. It was a creature of rules, of boundaries, and of tests. Each midnight ring of the doorbell, each disappeared spoon or plate, became a challenge to the couple's patience and ingenuity. Through this, they discovered that fear could be transformed into cautious respect. That understanding did not always require domination or confrontation. The house, alive with its small, enigmatic guardian, became a place of wonder as much as trepidation. A constant reminder that the unseen world was never truly absent. Over time, the couple began to adapt to the rhythm of the house and its small, mysterious guardian. The goblin's presence, though unsettling at first, became a part of their nightly routine. They learned to anticipate its movements and recognize the subtle signs that it had been nearby: a faint shuffle of feet, a soft giggle, the sudden misplacement of a kitchen utensil. The house itself seemed to respond to the creature's moods, the shadows lengthening when it was restless and retreating when it was calm. The couple realized that living with the goblin required more than courage. It required attentiveness, patience, and a willingness to respect a set of rules that they could not fully understand. One evening, as winter winds howled outside, the woman noticed something different. The goblin appeared at the edge of the dining table, holding a small bundle wrapped in a leaf. Its eyes, once glowing mischievously, now seemed almost solemn. The couple approached cautiously, hearts racing. The creature placed the bundle gently in the center of the table and vanished into the shadows without a sound. Inside, they found tiny carved figurines, each resembling a member of their household. It was as if the goblin was acknowledging their presence, their efforts to coexist, and offering a symbol of acceptance in return. The gesture left them awestruck. They realized that the goblin was not merely a trickster or thief, but a being capable of recognition and subtle gratitude. With this understanding, the disturbances in the house became less frequent. The goblin no longer took items indiscriminately, but instead engaged in subtle communication through small acts, moving objects to highlight forgotten corners, leaving cryptic messages of leaves or twigs arranged in patterns, or creating faint paths of crumbs to indicate where they should look. The couple responded with care, observing and interpreting the signs rather than reacting in fear. Slowly, a fragile bond emerged. The goblin respected the humans who respected it, and the humans learned that the unseen world was not always malevolent. It simply operated according to its own logic. Years passed, and the house, once a source of terror, became a place of quiet wonder. The couple, now accustomed to the nighttime rituals, no longer felt dread when the doorbell rang at midnight or when utensils disappeared, only to reappear in unexpected places. They accepted the presence of the goblin as part of their home, understanding that the boundaries between the human world and the unseen were delicate and must be navigated with care. The small creature, enigmatic and sometimes mischievous, remained a constant reminder that not all forces could be controlled or fully comprehended. It taught them humility, patience, and the value of coexistence with the unknown. The goblin, for its part, seemed to thrive on this understanding. It became less secretive and more expressive in subtle ways, leaving small treasures or markings that spoke directly to the couple's attentiveness. Life in the house continued, a blend of ordinary human routines and extraordinary, silent interactions with the unseen. The midnight doorbell, once a symbol of fear, became a familiar signal of presence. The shadows, once threatening, now hinted at mysteries to respect, rather than threats to flee. The couple had learned a powerful lesson, that fear could be transformed into respect, that the unseen could be understood not through force, but through observation and care, and that even the smallest beings could leave a profound mark on human lives. One night, a man was driving along a lonely highway, exhausted from a long day on the road. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a small hotel sign flickering in the distance. Feeling the need for rest, he decided to stop. Pulling into the parking lot, the air immediately seemed heavier, colder, though he shrugged it off as fatigue. He entered the lobby, where a dimly lit space greeted him. A bell rang as he approached the reception desk. The receptionist, a pale woman with piercing eyes, handed him his key. She spoke quietly but firmly. "On your floor, there is a room without a number. Do not look through the keyhole or knock on the door. It is forbidden." The man nodded politely, but his curiosity stirred. Carrying his suitcase, He rode the elevator up, feeling a subtle chill brush past him as the doors closed. The hotel hallway was unusually silent, the kind of silence that made every small creak of the floorboards sound like a scream. As he passed the unnumbered door, a shiver ran down his spine. There was something about it, something unnatural, almost breathing in the shadows. He hurried past, telling himself it was just his imagination. When he reached his room, he dropped his bag, turned on the lights, and tried to relax. He had dinner and watched some television, attempting to distract himself from the strange sense of unease that lingered from the hallway. But as the night deepened, curiosity gnawed at him. That mysterious door would not leave his thoughts. Why was it forbidden? What could possibly be behind it? He tried to sleep, but every sound, the creak of the radiator, the whisper of the wind through the cracked window, pulled his mind back to that door. Unable to resist, he finally rose from the bed and walked cautiously back to the unnumbered room. The hallway seemed longer, darker. Shadows clung to the corners like living things. Standing in front of the door, he pressed his eye to the keyhole. What he saw made him gasp and stumble backward. The room was bathed in a deep, unnatural red, like the walls themselves had been painted in blood. In the center, a woman in white stood with her back to him. Her presence exuded a chilling aura, yet she didn't move. The man's heart raced. He stumbled away, nearly tripping, and returned to his own room. Sleep became impossible. Every creak and groan of the old building made him flinch, imagining the woman turning to look at him, eyes burning, crimson, face pale and lifeless. The man sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, trying to convince himself that it had been a trick of the light, a shadow from the red drapes. But the image of the woman stayed burned in his mind. How could she be there, seemingly alive, yet completely still? He tried to rationalize it, saying it was a reflection, or maybe someone the hotel staff had hidden in that room. But his instincts screamed that something supernatural was present. The forbidden nature of the room now pressed on him more than ever. That very warning from the receptionist, the strict prohibition, suddenly felt like a lifeline he had ignored. He couldn't shake the fear creeping into every corner of his mind. Every passing moment, he felt as though unseen eyes were watching him from the darkened hallway. The room with no number loomed larger in his imagination than it had in reality. He could almost feel the red glow emanating through the door, as if the walls themselves were alive. Unable to endure the tension, he tried to sleep again. But each creak of the floor, each whisper of wind made him imagine the woman turning, her eyes wide, staring directly at him. Eventually, exhaustion overcame his fear, and he drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. Morning arrived, gray and still. He quickly packed his things, eager to leave, and returned the key to the receptionist. She looked at him with an unreadable expression and asked softly, "Did you see it?" He froze, the words stuck in his throat. Finally, he admitted, "I looked through the keyhole." The receptionist's face darkened. Her voice dropped to a whisper, trembling almost imperceptibly. "I warned you. That room, it is cursed. Many years ago, a woman died there under suspicious circumstances. Her spirit never left. Those who dared to peek through the keyhole, they rarely lived long after." Twisted with dread. A cold sweat ran down his back. He remembered the deep red room, the woman in white, her stillness and the terrifying weight of her presence. He shivered, realizing that the simple act of curiosity might have condemned him. Fear gnawed at his chest as he considered that he could be among the unlucky ones who would soon face a fate worse than death. He left the hotel as quickly as possible, glancing over his shoulder at the unnumbered room. For a moment, he thought he saw the red glow flicker, though he couldn't tell if it was a trick of the early morning light or something else. His hands trembled as he drove away, the image of the woman still etched in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about the receptionist's warning. What if she was right? What if the spirits of that cursed room followed him, waiting for the moment to claim those who dared look? The highway stretched before him, empty and silent, yet he felt the lingering presence of the hotel. Every shadow on the road seemed alive, moving unnaturally. His imagination ran wild, haunted by the image of the woman's pale face. Her eyes turned toward him in judgment. He tried to convince himself he was safe, that the hotel and its ghostly resident were behind him, but a cold chill in the car made him shiver. He realized that curiosity often came at a steep price, and some warnings should never be ignored. He never spoke of the experience to anyone, and the memory remained locked in his mind like a forbidden secret. Over the years, whenever he saw a hotel or passed a lonely building along the highway at night, his hands would tighten on the steering wheel. The memory of that room, the red glow, the woman in white, the deadly warning haunted him. He understood, in a way he had never understood before, that some places are not just buildings. They are traps, warnings, or prisons for restless spirits that linger far longer than anyone expects. Even today, he sometimes dreams of the hotel. In the dream, the red light grows brighter, and the woman turns her head slowly to reveal her lifeless, ghostly eyes staring straight at him. He wakes in a cold sweat, heart pounding, reminded that the supernatural often lies just beyond the veil, waiting for curiosity to cross its threshold. The memory of that night and the receptionist's words never left him. Those who look rarely live long after. The story of that cursed hotel spread quietly among the locals, whispered in hushed tones over time. Travelers who dared to stay there spoke of the unnumbered room, each retelling adding more fear. Some claimed to hear footsteps at night, faint cries, or the soft rustle of a dress across empty halls. The hotel staff, now long replaced, left behind only warnings, written notes in the lobby reminding visitors never to disturb the room. Yet, despite the stories, curiosity persisted. Some people could not resist peering into the forbidden space, each one adding to the curse that had haunted the woman for decades. The man never returned to the highway, avoiding the hotel entirely, yet he remained vigilant. He warned friends and strangers alike, but few understood. Those who heard the tale often dismissed it as a simple ghost story, not realizing that the danger was real and precise. Some nights, in quiet moments, he would swear he felt the presence again, a cold, watching sensation creeping along his spine. He realized that certain places, certain events, leave a mark on the soul, and the price of curiosity can be far higher than expected. Over time, he accepted that he had glimpsed something beyond human understanding. The woman in white, the room painted in red, and the chilling warning from the receptionist were not mere illusions. They were remnants of a tragedy, a spirit trapped in eternal torment, and those who intrude unknowingly risked a fate equally grim. Each retelling of the experience reinforced the lesson: respect the boundaries set by forces beyond comprehension, and never look through the keyhole. The highway remained quiet, the hotel a looming shadow against the night sky, and somewhere inside, the unnumbered room waited, its red glow ready to ensnare the next curious traveler who dared to cross the threshold, a silent, deadly trap awaiting the unwary. In the heart of a sprawling, bustling city, there existed a park of 15 hectares, a green oasis amidst the chaos of concrete and steel. People from all corners of the metropolis frequented it, drawn to its wide-open spaces, winding paths, and serene ponds that reflected the sunlight in 1,000 shimmering hues. The park was not only a haven for humans seeking solace or exercise. It was home to a group of remarkably gentle dogs, each one friendly, calm, and affectionate. For years, the bond between the parkgoers and these animals had been a cherished ritual. Runners would greet them in the morning, joggers would pass by in the evening, and children would play with the dogs as if they were long-lost friends. The dogs roamed freely, yet they never strayed far from the trails, seemingly aware of the park's boundaries and the people they had grown attached to. There was a comforting rhythm to their presence. When the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the grass and trees, the dogs would accompany the evening runners. Their paws made soft, rhythmic sounds against the gravel paths, and their eyes gleamed with intelligence and affection. Their loyalty had become so ingrained that many who visited the park could hardly imagine a day without them. But one evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline and painted the horizon in fiery oranges and reds, an unsettling silence greeted the joggers. The usual symphony of panting dogs and wagging tails was conspicuously absent. Confused, the runners paused, exchanging glances, Where were the dogs? The soft, familiar greetings that they had expected throughout their run were nowhere to be heard. The silence felt heavy, almost unnatural, like the park itself was holding its breath. A low, guttural growl shattered the quiet, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. It was deep, resonant, and filled with a malevolent intelligence. The runners stopped in their tracks, scanning the dimming park for the source. Emerging from the shadows was a black dog, far larger than any they had ever seen in the park. Its eyes glowed faintly in the twilight, and its massive jaws dripped with thick, dark blood. The runners instinctively stepped back, their hearts hammering. Before they could even process the creature's size, a dark figure appeared beside it. The figure was humanoid but cloaked in shadows, its form undefined, shifting as if it were made of smoke. A fetid, sulfurous stench filled the air, choking the runners and making them gag. The figure raised a hand, elongated and clawed, pointing at them as if marking their presence. "When there are no dogs," it said in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth itself, "do not come to the park. For on this day walks the devil's dog. You have been warned." The words, slow and deliberate, resonated through the park, a chilling warning that froze every runner in place. Before anyone could respond, the black dog and the shadowy figure vanished as quickly as they had appeared, dissolving into the twilight as if swallowed by the darkness itself. The runners, paralyzed with fear, barely managed to scramble away, racing back through the empty paths toward the city lights. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, hearts pounding as adrenaline surged through their veins. Even when they reached the safety of their homes, the echo of the growl and the memory of the glowing eyes haunted them. That night, sleep was elusive, replaced instead by the sense of being watched, hunted, and warned of something beyond comprehension. Rumors spread quickly the following day. People whispered in cafes, in gyms, and on social media, recounting the terrifying encounter. Some doubted the story, attributing it to the fear of darkness and imagination running wild. But those who had been there knew the truth. Something had shifted in the park. The gentle dogs had disappeared that evening, leaving behind a void that was filled with malevolence. The city's bustling citizens, normally unafraid and skeptical of urban legends, began to feel a collective unease. Every evening thereafter, those who had witnessed the black dog avoided the park, and others began to notice the absence of the familiar, friendly dogs. Each day that passed without them, the legend of the devil's dog grew stronger. The park, once a symbol of peace and joy, became a place of whispered caution and fearful curiosity. Children no longer played there after sunset, and even the most avid runners altered their schedules, retreating home before twilight. Days turned into weeks, yet the park remained eerily silent at dusk. The black dog was never seen again, nor was the shadowy figure, but the memory lingered like a persistent shadow. Locals started to leave offerings along the trails, small bones, scraps of meat, and even candles, hoping to appease whatever force had appeared. The park had transformed into a place of vigilance, where every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig could be perceived as a threat. One evening, a young couple decided to test the rumors. They entered the park just as the sun began to dip below the skyline. Their laughter and chatter soon faded as the familiar dogs were nowhere to be found. The moment felt different. The air was heavier, tinged with the same sulfurous stench that witnesses had described before. A sense of dread hung over them, making each step feel heavier, each breath more labored. The black dog, they feared, could appear at any moment, a manifestation of judgment or vengeance for those who ignored the warning. Suddenly, from the deepest shadows of the trees, a growl rolled out, low and menacing. It vibrated through the ground and into their bones. The couple froze, eyes wide as a pair of glowing orbs appeared among the branches. The massive black dog emerged, its fur matted and glistening with something dark. Its eyes glimmered with intelligence, almost awareness, as it stepped closer. Each movement deliberate and terrifying. Behind it, the shadowy figure rose, indistinct yet suffocatingly present. Its voice, a rasp of pure menace, whispered. The warning was given. You ignored it. The couple ran, stumbling through the darkened paths, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the dog's growls. The scent of sulfur was overwhelming, filling their lungs and making it nearly impossible to breathe. They didn't stop until they reached the park entrance, where the familiar city lights offered a fragile sense of safety. From that night onward, they never returned, and they shared their story only with those who dared to listen. Over time, the legend became ingrained in the city's culture. Residents told it to newcomers, warning them never to enter the park after sunset, especially on nights when the dogs were absent. The black dog was never captured, never explained, but the fear it inspired was real. The park remained a symbol of the thin veil between normalcy and the supernatural, a place where the rules of the world no longer seemed to apply. Even now, years later, some say that on certain evenings, if you run alone through the park after the dogs have vanished, you may hear the growl of the black dog and smell the sulfur in the air. And if you are unlucky enough to see it, its glowing eyes will pierce through the darkness, and the shadowy figure will remind you why the park belongs not to the living, but to the devil's dog. In the bustling streets of New York City, a legend has persisted for decades, one whispered among locals, repeated by taxi drivers, and recounted in the dim light of crowded bars and diners. It is the story of the crocodiles of New York, a tale as surreal as it is terrifying, blurring the line between myth and reality. It begins in the early 1930s, a time when the city was vibrant yet chaotic, filled with the clatter of trolley cars, the hum of industry, and the mingling of countless immigrants chasing dreams. Within this backdrop, a wealthy family residing on the Upper East Side made a peculiar acquisition, a small, exotic creature, a baby crocodile, just a few inches long. The family, enamored by the novelty of the pet, initially cherished it. The child of the household was delighted, imagining a tiny, scaly companion swimming in a lavish marble bathtub. But as the weeks passed, the crocodile began to grow. Its small, harmless appearance transformed into something more menacing. Its jaws strengthened, its tail thrashed with frightening speed, and its appetite became increasingly difficult to satisfy. What had once seemed charming now evoked dread and regret. The parents, panic, overtaking affection, faced a dilemma. They could not keep such a creature safely within the apartment, nor did they want to confront the logistics of feeding and caring for a rapidly growing reptile. In a moment of desperation, they made a fateful decision. They flushed the creature down the toilet. According to the legend, this single act was the beginning of a far more significant phenomenon. The crocodile was flushed into the vast sewage system beneath Manhattan, a labyrinth of tunnels, pipes, and hidden waterways stretching for miles. The city's infrastructure, dark and suffocating, became the creature's new home. As the story goes, the baby crocodile did not perish. Instead, it adapted to the subterranean environment, the warmth of the pipes, the abundance of rats and other vermin, and the isolation allowed the creature to grow at an unnatural pace. Over the years, it matured into a formidable predator, and its offspring multiplied in the shadowy depths of New York's sewers. The tale of these sewer-dwelling reptiles spread quickly, fueled by media reports, word of mouth, and the human tendency to blend fact with fiction. Occasionally, locals claimed sightings of unusually large lizards in unexpected places, damp alley, a flooded basement, or even, shockingly, on the street during the night. Some reported that these creatures could grow to astonishing sizes, 10 feet or more, their scaly hides camouflaged in shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Tales emerged of apartment dwellers who had encountered waterlogged reptiles when plunging a toilet or draining a flooded sink, only to flee in terror. Over time, the story evolved into a cautionary tale about the consequences of human carelessness and arrogance. It illustrated how the urban environment, often taken for granted, could harbor hidden dangers. The notion that these creatures lurked beneath the city became an inseparable part of New York folklore, whispered to children as a warning to respect nature and the delicate balance of ecosystems. Tourists and skeptics alike would scoff, dismissing it as mere legend, yet the stories persisted, fueled by occasional glimpses of strange shapes in storm drains or glimpses of movement beneath subway grates, whether entirely true or a product of imagination. The legend of the New York crocodiles endures. It paints the city not just as a place of towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, but as a living, breathing organism with dark, hidden corners. Beneath the concrete and asphalt lies a secret world where the consequences of human whimsy take on terrifying scaled forms. The story begins with one impulsive act, one decision to discard a living creature thoughtlessly, and spirals into a tale of survival, adaptation, and the eerie possibility that beneath the city, these crocodiles still thrive. As the years passed, stories of these elusive creatures multiplied almost as quickly as the crocodiles themselves. Urban legends began to describe entire colonies thriving beneath the city streets, their numbers growing with each generation. The sewers, normally perceived as dark, unpleasant, but harmless, were transformed into a subterranean jungle, filled with winding tunnels, flooded chambers, and secret water passages connecting rivers and drains. The crocodiles, perfectly adapted to their hidden world, became apex predators of this forgotten environment. Their survival instincts sharpened, their senses evolved to detect vibrations from above, their eyes adjusting to the faint, flickering light of the occasional manhole opening. New York locals would tell tales of mysterious encounters that seemed to validate the legends. Sanitation workers occasionally reported enormous lizards slipping from pipes during inspections. Plumbers told stories of crawling, hissing shadows that vanished when lights flickered on. Fishermen in the East River claimed to glimpse massive, scaly backs slicing through the murky water at night. Some even swore that subway rats mysteriously disappeared, suggesting they had become prey to unseen hunters below. Newspapers in the 1930s and 40s occasionally ran sensational stories describing giant sewer lizards with eyes that glowed like coals and jaws capable of snapping a broomstick in half. The legend gained further credibility through photographs, though always blurry or ambiguous, capturing faint outlines of massive creatures in storm drains or subway tunnels. Tourists and thrill seekers began to visit the city specifically to test their courage, peering into manholes and attempting to catch a glimpse of these reptilian denizens. Every Halloween, the story resurfaced, and whispers of the New York crocodiles spread across the country. Local television programs dramatized the accounts, showing actors exploring the sewers with flashlights, encountering the faint glimmer of a tail, the ripple of water, or the reflection of pale eyes in darkened pools. The legend also morphed into a cautionary tale about the consequences of negligence and cruelty. The story emphasized that the crocodile's existence was a direct result of the careless actions of a wealthy family. One impulsive decision to discard a living creature that should have been treated with care. In folklore, this moral was often highlighted. Humans meddle with nature at their own risk, and even the smallest act of negligence could unleash chaos beyond comprehension. Children grew up hearing the story as a warning, imagining colossal predators lurking just below the city sidewalks, waiting for those who dared to disrespect life. Some accounts even suggested that these crocodiles had begun venturing beyond the sewers, exploring the streets and abandoned buildings at night. Shadows moving beneath fire escapes, mysterious splashes in puddles after heavy rain, and footprints in alleyways fueled a growing sense of unease. Residents swore they had encountered eyes reflecting their flashlight beams in darkened corners, only for the shapes to vanish moments later. The creatures, according to legend, had become nearly invisible masters of stealth, perfectly attuned to their urban environment. Though skeptics dismissed these stories as exaggerations or hoaxes, the legend persisted. Over the decades, the myth of New York's crocodiles merged with the city's symbol of the hidden, unpredictable, and sometimes frightening nature of urban life. To some, the creatures represented the power of nature to reclaim its territory. To others, they were a reminder that even a single reckless act could have consequences beyond imagination. Even today, the legend continues to inspire fear and fascination. Whether one chooses to believe in the crocodile's existence or not, the stories serve as an enduring reminder. beneath the bustling streets of Manhattan, in the hidden depths of the sewers, there may still be creatures lurking in the shadows, waiting for the curious, the careless, or the unlucky to stumble into their realm. The urban myth of the New York crocodiles is more than just a tale of monsters. It is a story of survival, adaptation, and the uncanny ways in which nature can persist in the most unexpected places. The city above may seem orderly and bright, but below, a hidden world thrives, reminding all who hear the tale that New York is not only a place of opportunity and dreams, but also a labyrinth of secrets and silent predators. Years passed, and the city never seemed to forget the rumors of the crocodiles. Children whispered the tales in school, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. Subway workers told stories of glimpses in the tunnels, of scales glinting under dim lights, of long, sinuous tails vanishing into the darkness. Even at the most mundane moments, a splash in a puddle or a ripple in the sewers could send chills down a New Yorker's spine. Tourists laughed when they first heard the story, imagining oversized reptiles slithering through the underground pipes. But those who had lived in the city longer knew better. There were accounts, never officially verified, of shadows moving where shadows shouldn't, of noises that didn't match any animal known to the city. Late-night joggers sometimes claimed to see green eyes, reflecting the streetlights from storm drains, disappearing before anyone else could look. The legend became a part of the city's folklore, whispered in bars, told in the corners of libraries, and on online forums where people shared true sightings. What made the tale truly terrifying was its unpredictability. The crocodiles were not confined to the sewers. Occasionally, residents reported unusual patterns: drains clogged with mud and strange debris, gardens ravaged, pools mysteriously drained, and even basements flooded with murky water. Pets disappeared without explanation, leaving owners frantic. Each incident reinforced the notion that these creatures had grown bold and cunning, perhaps evolved over decades in the city's hidden waterways. Authorities predictably dismissed the stories as urban myth. Reports were logged and ignored, dismissed as exaggerations or misidentified animals. But some city workers who had spent years in the sewers whispered privately that the sightings were real. They spoke of the strange noises echoing off brick walls, of tracks that couldn't belong to any known mammal, and of a quiet intelligence behind the eyes that caught theirs in the darkness. They warned that the reptiles were not mindless. They were calculating, patient, and possibly waiting for the right moment to surface. The legend reached its peak one hot summer night, when a series of disappearances shook a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood. Pets vanished, basement doors were left ajar, and murky footprints appeared along the alleyways. At first, neighbors assumed a burglar, a vagrant, or some natural disaster. But when a local teenager recorded a video on his phone, motionless shapes slipping through the sewage grates, long tails flicking beneath the streetlights, the city's urban legend took a horrifying turn into reality. News outlets labeled it a hoax, yet the video spread like wildfire. Millions watched, paused, and replayed the footage, debating its authenticity, feeling a growing dread with every passing second. People began changing their routines. They avoided poorly lit streets, they steered clear of open drains and grates, and they checked their homes for signs of intrusion. The once invisible sewers became a place of terror, a reminder that New York held secrets beneath its bustling streets. Children were warned to never play near alleys and storm drains, and even adults felt a subtle tension as they walked past the city's oldest neighborhoods. And the crocodiles, if they were still there, remained unseen but always suspected, a lurking threat beneath the surface. Some say they multiply, adapting to the labyrinth of tunnels, growing larger and more cunning, feeding on the city's waste, and perhaps on anything foolish enough to wander too close. Others whisper that, on certain nights, when the city's noise fades and the shadows lengthen, you can hear them moving beneath you, the faint splash of water, the shift of a massive body, the subtle vibration of the streets above. So the next time you flush the toilet, walk past a storm drain, or glance at a dark alley, remember the tale of the New York crocodiles. The city may seem safe, the streets familiar, and the subway routine mundane, but somewhere below, In the unseen depths, creatures wait. The legend may be old, the story whispered countless times, yet the terror remains, a reminder that in a city built on concrete and steel, nature's most primal forces might still thrive, hidden, patient, and watching. After all, urban legends often start with a seed of truth, and some truths, especially the terrifying ones, never die.